Hello everybody. I know it's been a little while since I did a video, and I don't know when I don't make a particular plan to do them in any schedule. I just, whenever it comes to me, and this pastor has time, to film it. Can't film it myself or even put it out there for everybody, but with God's help and the pastor's help, we do these. I want to talk a little about God's plan, and when you go through these horrible things, kind of like what I'm going through right now with, my left arm that really just doesn't work, but I see I'm getting a little more movement out of it. And they told me I'd never get it back, but it doesn't appear that that's going to be the case. Even my current PTs think that I will get it back. And then, of course, my left leg that I don't know if you guys are original, those of you that came and visited me and stuff, if you even touched my leg, I screamed out in pain. Or if you touched my hand, one doctor said it was like rigor mortis had set it on that side. And I don't know if that's even possible, but said, and it certainly hurt like crazy. It was one of those pains that would definitely make you holler out. You feel it, and you just couldn't even be touched. And when they would move me around, oh, that was so painful. You go through this, and I think, did I get off God's plan or what? And then I think, no, I didn't. But this is part of God's plan, and God tells us that these things will happen, and to be joyful, because He's got you covered, and He tells when things that are going bad for you, you should just know, well, that isn't God planning for you to go through horrible things. It's God's plan to get you ready for whatever's next, the next bigger thing. I think God is just using this time to train me up for whatever He wants to use me for, so I can fit better into, the church body. And we should all be trying very hard to be in the church body. We don't want to have this church body that has no arms and legs or eyes or mouth. We want it to be fully functional. And we all need to get involved to do that. And God has a plan for you. And He tells you in the Bible that He has a plan for good and not for evil. You don't know what it is, but you do need to trust Him, God has a plan. And you can mess it up in a few ways, but the biggest things, that He talks about, if you go through something and it's because you did wrong, then what benefit is that to you or anybody? You're just, you just did something wrong, so you're getting a bad thing. But it can also be when God just wants to get your attention or to train you up on something. And I do think, I've learned how to trust God more. You'd think that this would kind of make the opposite. And when it first happened, it did that, I started telling God, and I said, it's hard to trust you when you do something like this, And then the next thing I know, and some of you probably already heard this, my mom was going to church, and they had these big doors, and this lady was in a hurry to get out of church, and she shoved the door open real fast, and my mom's in her 90s, and she's on a walker, and the door hit her. And she went flying down onto the pavement, and she broke her arm. And on top of what was happening to me, I was like, God, what are you doing to me? Why is this happening? And, I can't even go visit my mom. I can't do anything for her. I'm stuck here. She's clear over in Phoenix, and I'm here. There's not a thing I could do. It was very, very frustrating for me. I think that's one thing God wanted me to learn is to trust Him. And, I was kind of mad at Him for that, and I told Him so, But I've since asked for forgiveness because, what happened is she ended up going to the hospital, and they tested her blood, which they would normally have never done that because she was never going to the hospital for anything if she didn't have to. She's very much into homeopathic medicines, But anyway, for her getting injured, there happened to be a paramedic right there that, helped get her a ambulance right away because he worked with the EMS, and he just called them directly and had them come get her. And they took care of her and got her into the hospital, and then they drew her blood and they found out she was incredibly salt deprived, so salt deprived that in 2 days she would have been dead from lack of salt. And if she hadn't got broken her arm, she'd have been dead. And God knew that. It seems like all these horrible things are happening. I still don't know 100% sure why I have, had this stroke, but I am, after God showing me that He can be trusted, even in, breaking my mom's arm, which, Job says He can be trusted into death, and I think you might be seeing that with Charlie Kirk, even though I don't know the man at all. I don't feel comfortable talking about him, but he trusted God with his life, and you might say he lost his life. No, he went to heaven. He done, and I'll bet you God is going to watch over his family. God really watches over widows. We hear that in the Bible. He takes care of all of us, but I think especially those. And God loves everybody, and He has a good plan still for the family, and for this stuff that Charlie Clerk thought was important, and it is starting to really ramp up. And God can be trusted, even with our lives. He's going to make beauty out of ashes. If you find yourself in trouble because you decide to break the law, well, God tells you not to break the law. And God tells us to obey them. And even not just to obey them, but to be exemplary. We should be exemplary in how we treat each other and how we treat others and what we do. You don't ignore people in need. If you've got the means to help them, you can't just say, I'll pray for you. You gotta, if you have the means to help them, you gotta do it. What His plan is for you, because whatever it is, it's going to be good. You don't have to know what it is. You just got to know that it's going to be good. I didn't know my mom was going to die. I would have found out she was dead just 2 days later instead of she had a broken arm, and that would have been a much harder thing to me take, even if I hadn't had the stroke. That would have been horrible. I learned to trust God. I think my life is going to be better, and I think things are just going to get better and better. I mean, I am able to stand Hemi walker. I can push myself up and stand up now, and I can take a step or so forward and then back. Can't really take too much forward, otherwise I actually will fall forward, but I'm getting there. I mean, I couldn't have done that at all before. And, my legs getting stronger, my arms getting more movement. It's got a long ways to go. I mean, my fingers don't work and wrist doesn't work, but, the arm is starting to, and at the shoulder and somewhat at the elbow, just a teeny bit. And so it's all improvement. And I'm not depressed. I'm basically happy, and I get to, do things on the computer, and I didn't think I was going to be able to, but a friend made me a custom keyboard holder so that I can have access to my keyboard, and I can do a little bit more on the computer than I was able to before. And it's very nice, that God provided me with friends and people that care about me and help me through this, but mostly He's the one helping me through this. If I have a question, I ask Him, and He answers it in different forms. I'll hear something suddenly. A lot of times I hear from a pastor's sermon, I'll ask something, and the pastor will kind of enlighten me in a sermon, and I don't even tell him about it. So I think it's God all the way. God says He'll share His knowledge, and He will take care of us. We may not get everything we want. I want 20 sports cars and 50 luxury vehicles and about 70 homes throughout the United States. No, I don't really, but
and a Ford Lightning.
I do want a Ford Lightning. Well, actually, what I really, really want isn't the Lightning, but is the hybrid. That's the one I want, because I have range anxiety. I want to be able to drive as far as I want. And so that's what I want, is to get a Ford F-150. And I hope to use it, to help people and, and do good things, If not, it's not, I'm not going to be disappointed. I tell God, what I want, and if he gives it to me, great. He gave me my last truck. I have a Ford Excursion, and I wanted that when I first saw them come out, but they were like $90,000, and I was making, probably around $10 an hour at the time. So it was like way out of my budget. And I wanted to get a Centennial one. I wanted a 2000, and I was like, how am I going to ever get this? And I was, well, it was like a couple of years later, I saw this exact red one that I wanted sitting on the lot, and I stopped and inquired about it. Well, they only wanted $9,000 for it, and they were giving me a bunch of money on the trade. I mean, I got it for next to nothing. And that thing I have owned for more than 25 years. It's over a quarter of a century of use, and I probably only put $5,000 to $6,000 in maintenance on it. God gives you something, he gives you something good. This, I use it for all kinds of things, and it's been a blessing to me and the family, and I tried to make it a blessing for others, and it has been. And God doesn't give us stuff to for whatever reason, He didn't tell me I had to do anything with it; just gave it to me, and it was in pretty perfect shape, and it doesn't break down. I didn't have to replace I didn't have to replace it for the first 16 years I owned the vehicle. So, things like that, they just break down commonly, just haven't been breaking down. I had some problems with the electric locks, but I found a replacement for like $10 online, and I ordered it and I replaced it myself, and it's worked perfect ever since. Not very much money in that. And God gives you the desires of your heart, and he plans good things for you. This truck never gets stuck, and it always starts except for if the battery dies, which doesn't happen very often. It's always an easy fix: pop out the battery or charge it, and it goes. It's been a very, very reliable vehicle. It's been a wonderful thing. God just gives you the desire of your heart. You got to know what it is. You got to know that He's not going to give it to you if it's bad for you. He's not going to give you drugs because they're not good for you. God knows you. He knows your heart, and He loves you, and He made a plan for you before you were born. He knew He had some good things for you. You're important. Don't let your gifts go to waste. Do what you can to get a part of the church body, and do what you can to be a part of all that and get all that God has for you. It's not like it's just work. When you do that, you learn things, and you become a better person. You'll get more out of it than you give. I'll tell you that. Don't let the devil talk you out of it and say you don't have time. We make time for a lot of things. Going to a movie that you probably even shouldn't have watched. You can do something really beneficial for you and others. Just know God has a plan, and His plan is not to let you flounder and have trouble, and He's going to feed you and clothe. I haven't been to work in 2 years, and I don't have any outstanding bills, and I haven't been starving, and I haven't been dying and getting worse like the doctors told me. The palliative doctors, all four of them agreed that I was going to die. Plus, there's many times that the doctors said, "Oh, you've got this problem, you got this problem." I had the AFib in my heart. My heart was going so fast I couldn't slow it down, and they told me I'd be dead by morning. And then during them putting my midline into my heart, I got staph infection right in my heart, and they told me I was going to die because the place you never want to get it is in your heart or in your bloodstream, and it's in both to start with because it went right into my heart. And they said, you know, this will kill you. He said, we'll try to fight it, but, you know, don't keep, you know, he goes, I don't want to get your hopes up. He says, it's just not a very likely thing, but guess what? I didn't die. And the first time they treated it, it cleared up immediately. I guess that's not normal. It's a fairly difficult thing to clean up, especially when it's spread through your whole body. They kept checking me because they didn't believe it. They kept taking my blood, and boy, you get so many pinholes in a small area that they were trying to get my blood. That starts to hurt, let me tell you. And no, God was not punishing me. And God loves you. Goodbye.